One of the women I look up to the most, Liza Morales, runs several multi-million-dollar businesses, and during the most difficult part of her life, decides to launch a fashion brand and social enterprise that gives her international recognition. We will hear her three top strategies and how she does it all, and a tip on how to future proof your business. Welcome to the Architect My Life podcast. I'm your host, Aya Shlachter, CEO of MGS Global Group. We provide on demand drafting services to overwhelmed architects and design firm owners. In this podcast, we talk to successful women firm owners about challenges to running a business while balancing their lives. My company's mission is to help architects and designers maintain a healthy work-life balance. Architect My Life is where we learn how to achieve your goals through genuine stories and conversations with successful women in the industry. Hi everyone, our guest this week is Liza Morales. Liza is the principal and design director of Ecotecture Design Studio. Her firm specializes in sustainable architecture. She was one of the first Filipino Leed Certified Architects. She is also the CEO of Philippine Geogreen, a leading distributor of sustainable products in the Philippines. She also co-founded Tali, a social enterprise that produces handbags and home accessories. She employs and provides livelihood for women in impoverished rural areas and communities around the Philippines. Liza is a serial entrepreneur who has been featured in Asia's biggest publications, including a 45-minute segment in CNN's Leading Women, dedicated to her accomplishments as a female entrepreneur. She's also an active member of the Entrepreneurs Organization in the Philippines. So I'm so thrilled to talk to her today. Welcome to the show, Liza.
Nice to be here.
I'm
I
so
missed
glad.
you.
I know, me too. And also disclaimer to some of the people who listen to my podcast regularly. When I speak to my Filipino friends, my Taglish comes out. It's Tagalog English, but we'll make sure you understand most of our, conversation. So Liza, we've been friends for I think 23 years, right?
Yeah, thereabouts.
Yeah. So, but I never asked you your origin story and how you became an architect, or who was the person who influenced you to become an architect.
Okay, that's such an interesting question. Actually, it's not really like by choice. I kind of feel that it was like by default that I became an architect. I come from a long line of, professionals. So my grandfather was one of the first, structural engineers in the country. My parents are both entrepreneurs, but they are also both professionals. They're both civil engineers. They're both licensed civil engineers. So I come from this long line of, professionals who are involved in the, construction industry. And I think, as the eldest, among, three siblings, it was kind of expected that I was going to take on, the leading the company in the civil engineering world, but that I didn't find that too sexy. So, I kind of wanted to veer away from that, but still kind of related, not too far away from construction. It's still, construction, but, in a more sexier and I felt more impactful way as an architect.
That's great. So you decided just, because the family was in the construction business, that was the missing link, the architecture part.
Yeah.
So, like I just want to ask you this question because you're extremely accomplished and successful. What was your life before success and your career? And, what were your struggles before you became who you are?
I think, I worked, those 9 to 5 jobs, from the very beginning, like I was interning and then I took on, work as an architect when I got licensed here in the Philippines, and also when I sought my licensure in New York State. So I worked for a big firm, different kinds of firms. I worked for small firms and big firms, and I learned so much from each one. But of course, there were also struggles, especially coming out of grad school, starting out in New York. And I'm sure you've dealt with this, I also, when, we first started out in the real world after grad school, that, this Asian girl, working in a big firm in the US, you kind of have to deal with, having to prove yourself, doubly hard than, the others who were with you. I had to, with regard to struggle there, being, here in the Philippines, it's still a male dominated world, architecture and construction in general. And I think even during that time that I was in New York, you had to deal with, racism, sexism, all those isms that you had to deal with. But, looking back, I'm kind of, I guess, I kind of look at those struggles, as things that honed me into the person that I am today. And without those struggles, I wouldn't have I guess, the grit. And I learned so much. And I think those things, if you look back and as long as you learn from those struggles and hardships and mistakes, even, then then you can just carve out a path for yourself.
So Liza and I were together in NJIT. We both, well, she has two master's degrees. So I met her in NJIT, New Jersey Institute of Technology. And then we both also went to Columbia University. So Liza and I go way back. And I remember she worked in this major firm in New York, and she was hustling, like working nights, weekends, 16-hour days. I remember that, Liza, right?
Yeah.
And you had just given birth to Joaquin, but you were
Mhm.
still working. But one story that I remember that Liza's my idol. When she gave birth to Joaquin in the hospital room, she was still studying for the AREs while breastfeeding, and that's like hands down. Remember that, Liza?
I don't even remember, but yeah, that sounds like me.
Yeah, I saw you in the hospital with the baby, but you had all your ARE study guides because you had an exam while breastfeeding Joaquin. And that's a testament of Liza. She's really super hardworking, and she's tough as nails.
Well, you
Yeah,
gotta do
so
what you gotta do.
I know. So now that you're back in the Philippines, tell us what led you to become, to pursue like sustainable architecture. That was not really a thing back in 2008. I mean, it's not as, now it's kind of like expected that all firms have sustainable practices. But what prompted you to start the sustainable, to practice sustainable architecture?
I think that it didn't really start out in 2008, but that was already sort of in my consciousness that I wanted to do something that was sustainable and that was good for the environment. As architects or any designer, you kind of I at least me personally, I felt that guilt that here we are sort of ravaging the earth and building things and destroying you know greenery and stuff like that. And that's always been in the consciousness, and that was something that I felt that I had to do something about. But I guess what kind of what sort of tipped the scale for me was when my firstborn child Joaquin was born. That kind of made me think that what am I doing really, what am I leaving behind as a legacy, when I guess that happens. I as a mother, I'm sure that's kind of like what you think of, like when you have children, what kind of world are you leaving behind for your kids? How are you impacting the environment? Are we leaving a world behind that we could be proud of? And I believe motherhood or parenthood changes people in profound ways. And for me, that was sort of the direction that I decided to take on, that I wanted to do something that was, I felt more responsible. I felt better for the environment. I felt that I could be proud of and tell my kids, like, okay, when it's my time to go, that this is something that I'm leaving you with.
That's great, Liza. Liza also and I have this similar paths. We were both living in New York, had kids, but we both moved to the Philippines around within a year, right, Liza? Maybe,
Yeah, I think
yeah.
so.
So when you moved to the Philippines, did you start your architecture right away? I mean, how did the Filipinos, was it hard to get clients who were sustainable? I mean, who practiced, sustainable architecture, or who believed in that? Like, how did you get started in the Philippines?
Actually, it was more, it was kind of organic the way that happened. When we moved back, I moved my family back to the Philippines in 2009. And what I started out with, I don't know if you mentioned it, but I started out with a distribution company, which is Philippine Geogreen. So before I left New York, I found, just because I was exposed, from my practice, working in the firm in New York, I was exposed to the different sustainable or green products. So, there's Big Ass Fans, there's Solo Tube, and there's many others. So I took on the distributorship and, met with those companies before moving back to the Philippines, because I knew that that was something that I wanted to do. So it started out with, like wanting to bring sustainable products in the Philippines, because I knew that at some point, if I had to practice and design, homes and whatever, it was necessary that, that we have products locally available, because it would be hard to, design all these things, but, it kind of feels, unripe, without the products that, you need to be able to make things more sustainable. So, when I came back in 2009, so started out with Geogreen, so made sure that that was set up. It's just like having a child, with the companies that I've put up. It's like, startup blues. You kind of have to just focus on the child, and then when you kind of have, feel more comfortable about letting go, then you can have another child again. So I started out with Geogreen and, kept that running. And when I felt that, okay, it's running, kind of fairly smoothly, and I had, capable executive team who was helping me out at that time, then that was the time that I started, going into the Ecotecture Design Studio and, doing more things for my practice. But even before that, I was, doing, design for family and friends. Even, at the start of Geogreen, and Ecotecture was not formally incorporated yet. I was just consulting and helping, people with their homes and stuff. So, it's kind of, left brain, right brain kind of thing. So, Geogreen, lets me have my entrepreneurial, sort of, scratch that entrepreneurial itch and let me do things, like you're handling finances, you're handling operational stuff and all that. But also the Ecotecture Design Studio lets me get my creative juices flowing, and it helps me, kind of exercise, what we've been trained for. We've been in this field for so many years. We've studied our master's degrees, and it was, for me, I felt like it was a shame that I was not practicing it. So I always made sure that, in big or small ways, I was always practicing architecture.
So now I remember, yes, before you left, you established Geogreen and you started with Solitube and Big Ass Fans. I remember now. And then Ecotecture came. So can you please tell us what other products you sell? I know you won several awards as the top distributor for, some of your products, right? Like for Big Ass Fans in Asia, or yeah. Talk
Yeah,
about
so
like,
we have Big Ass Fans. Yeah. So we have Big
yeah.
Ass Fans. We started out with Big Ass Fans and Solar Tube, in 2009. And then that portfolio grew. So, we don't really try to distribute so many products. It's just like we want to be able to focus on, products that we felt complemented each other. So we make sure that we're just, for example, if we're doing fans, it's just Big Ass Fans, and we're doing other things that complement that. We have a very, sort of, strong value system, or culture in the company, is that, we all, even everyone here, all our sales members of our sales team and managers, everyone in the team believe, that our products are the best, and we really source and vet and, make sure that we check out each and every product. And that doesn't feel right that you say that your product's the best, but you're also selling the competing products. So we just make sure that we just feature one for each category, and that they complement each other. So we have Big Ass Fans, we have Solid Tube. They're both from the US. We're the exclusive distributor for all those, for all the products that we carry. We also have, Fresh Air UV, which is out of Jupiter, Florida. Fresh Air UV is, a sustainable product as well. It's basically a UV system that you incorporate in your air conditioning system to make it function more efficiently. And it also cleans the air. And that kind of was born out of, that was sort of our pandemic pivot. Because of COVID, there was this need, to, disinfect the air. So that just was, something that happened recently. And it was kind of like a response to, what was needed in the country at that time. So, we're carrying that, and, it's doing really well. A lot of companies have embraced, having cleaner technology inside their offices and, establishments. So aside from fresh air, another company or product that we are distributing is Fimmer, which is out of Italy. So it's like one of the leading inverter companies. So, it's for photovoltaics or solar panels. So they're a very forward-thinking company, and I like it because they're the only ones who actually have, what you call as, I'm not very techy, but okay, so they can actually you can actually sell to the grid. So they have the inverter that allows you to convert and your electricity and be able to sell it back to the grid using cryptocurrency. So it's like one of those very
Oh,
advanced technologies that's like crypto ready, and then that's kind of like, to me, mind blowing. So they do solar inverters for grid tied installations and off grid installations, but they also and one thing, a product that we're launching in a few months is the EV chargers, because EV cars are slowly picking up here in the Philippines. So we want to make sure that homes, offices, groceries, malls, how in the States you go to a shopping mall and you have EV chargers, you could just plug your car in. We unfortunately we don't have that yet. So we're in the process of launching that soon, and we're really excited about it.
oh wow, that's really exciting. Nice. Can you hear the passion in her voice? I love the way
Mm.
she talks about all of her products, and it's all over the Philippines actually. I see all the big ass fans. I'm like, yeah, that's Liza everywhere. Um so just a quick question, because a lot of us creatives, architects, we were not trained as businessmen, or we weren't trained in business. How did you learn, your business sense? Where did you get, your business savvy?
I guess, well, I'm still learning. I wouldn't say that, I, I know everything there is about business, but I guess what sort of like planted the seed in my mind are my parents. They've both been, as I mentioned earlier, they're both professionals. They're both civil engineers, but they're also very entrepreneurial. Like between my parents, they have like 15 companies, that they've set up from the very beginning. And I guess just having that, it's like, learning by osmosis, just like being exposed to those things day in and day out. My parents would pick me up from school, and then I would hang out in the office, which was like right beside, our home. So, I would just like hang out and play there. But, little did I know that I was actually picking things up just from the conversations of the people around me. My parents during summer, they would make me, I also I actually was very entrepreneurial from a very young age because of the exposure from my parents. But I was like selling chocolates to friends in grade school and stuff. But I guess I learned or picked that up, just by working summers in my parents' office. So my mom would assign me to the accounting department, and this was like, I think I was 6 or 7 years old, and my job was to check each and every bus receipt and to make sure that they weren't tampered with, like like petty cash stuff, like five
7 years
pesos, which
old.
is, yeah, at 7 years old. So I would just like make sure that the receipts were not tampered with and the amounts are correct. So I guess that kind of led to my trust issues much later on. But on top of that, I would also remember, now that I'm thinking about it, when like during the summers, I would always love to hang out in my lola or grandmother's province in Pampanga. And my grandmother, she lived by herself, so I would like keep her company some summers. So I would spend like a month or two with her, and she made me help out. She had this little grocery, or what you call a sari store, like really like mom and pop, like where you buy the essentials right beside the church. And I was there, just like manning the store, at a very young age, collecting from people. And there were like people who would like buy things on credit, and I was like so strict. And like my lola or my grandmother was telling me like, oh, it's good when you're there because you can actually collect, because they can't say no to you and stuff. So I guess that kind of made me the entrepreneur I am today. But of course, those gave me the basic skills and that entrepreneurial drive or passion. But of course, you and I know that there's much more to entrepreneurship. I mean, you have to know how to read your your financial statements and all of that, we didn't really learn in school. And I think a big part of my growth as an entrepreneur is my membership in the entrepreneurs organization, and the having peers struggling through the same issues day in and day out, and having that peer-to-peer network, and making sure that you have that support system, and just learning from people who have gone on the same path as you is such a big deal. And I think that's people who are you know hanging out with people who are always craving to learn more and grow more, I think really just helped to my development as an entrepreneur.
So Liza is being modest. To become a member of the EO, you have to at least make $1 million at the minimum. So I'm just saying, becoming an EO member is really, quite an accomplishment already. I think you've gotten there, but it's also good to be around people who, who are more successful, or people who are striving to be, better, and learning from, your business experiences. So where did Tali come from? This is a sensitive time in your life. When you started Tali, there was a little bit of drama going on. I don't know if you want to talk about it, but I'm still amazed that Liza, she launched this bag company called Tali, made out of recycled straw material, and she employed women prisoners so that they can still make a living in prison. And her products are all over the world. She was in Paris, and it's in New York, in the fanciest boutiques. She started this business while there was a lot of issues at the back end too. She's also human, right? So can you talk about that a little?
Yeah, I guess that happened during a difficult. It was like I was like at a crossroads in my life. I was going through my separation at that time, and of course there was so much turmoil, and you kind of if anyone, and I don't wish it on my worst enemy, anyone who's gone through a divorce or separation, it's just like the toughest. It really shakes you down to your core when you start questioning who you are as a person, whether you're capable, whether you can raise two children on your own, uh, basically grow a company, and basically just live life and do everything on your own. It kind of like shakes you after being in a marriage for so long. And this kind of happened during Tali Handmade came during this time. And I think the reason, I guess with everything that I do, it's kind of I guess intentional, but at the same time organic, like the way it happens. It kind of just, it's not like, oh, okay, I'm gonna have this company in X number of years. It was never like that. But there's always that intention in the back of my mind, and I would never really figure out until I feel that the timing is right and things just kind of fall into place. So with Tali Handmade, as I've mentioned, it kind of happened at a very difficult, turning point in my life. And I wouldn't say it was like clinically depressed, but of course, like you're really, it was hard to get on with, what you were doing. So, I had the two companies. I had Geogreen, I had Ecotecture back then already. I had the kids, and, just kind of like doing things and churning things out day to day. But I was also beginning to question, like, who am I really? Is this all there is to life? And you kind of go through this existential crisis when you go through a separation or divorce. And I knew that God put me on this earth, and I was like capable of doing much more than what I was doing already back then. Owing to the fact also that I probably have ADHD, although it's not like clinically diagnosed. All serial entrepreneurs are to some certain extent, have ADHD. But when I started Tali, it was just like me wanting to do more and wanting to do better. It was like, okay, I was depressed, I was sad, I was going through this crisis, and I wanted to channel that in a way that was more positive. It's like there were days that I didn't want to get up from bed. I just wanted to just like stay there and not work. And it was like, what's going on with my life? It was like your life is just basically turned upside down. But I kind of like one day just said like, okay, I'm gonna like try to snap out of it and channel this into something. And it gave me the distraction to kind of focus, like once I felt that, okay, I'm done grieving, I'm mourning my marriage, I could channel that into something that was more productive. So that came about also when me and my friend, who's my partner in Tali Handmade, Marielle, we're both soccer parents, and one time in the soccer field while watching our daughters play soccer, we kind of said, hey, like, are you kind of bored with what you're doing day to day? And and I told her I came across this community, this basically prison or jail, where there are women who are skilled to crochet. And I said, we might be able to do something there. It's just like they do these handicrafts, but it's not at a level that you could really easily market. So maybe there's like we could teach them some skills and maybe help them with design. I mean, I had that design hat, or a design, I would say, background. I'm trained in architecture, but I've always felt that design is design. You can just like pivot from one field to the other, and it's just a matter of changing scales, medium, and magnitude. So I felt that, okay, maybe there's something I could still do as a designer, and kind of like go outside, pushing my boundaries. And accessories was something that never occurred to me that I would embark on, but it did happen. So we taught the women in jail how to create more fashionable bags, and women's accessories. And then it was picked up by people from the press, influencers, and all that, and it just came organically. And we represented the Philippines in Maisonette Objet in Paris a few years ago. And that to me was like a very, very big honor, and kind of gave you the validation, or gave us the validation that we needed, that hey, we're a legit accessories company, that people actually recognize us. And so that I think was a big deal.
You talk about future proofing a lot. Can you explain that a little bit so we can learn from you in terms of what you mean by future proofing everything in your life?
Future proofing, I mean, that's I think a struggle that every company or every entrepreneur, something that we all struggle with on a day-to-day basis. Nobody, unfortunately, has a crystal ball to be able to predict what will happen next. Like, nobody ever predicted. I mean, maybe Bill Gates did, but the rest of us in the world didn't know that COVID was going to happen like 2 years ago, and yet here we are. So for me, like my own definition, people might have their own personal definition of future proofing. But for me personally, I see it as like just maybe finding a way to stay ahead of the curve, keeping your ear on the ground. Like, I'm in my office right now, and I talk to my sales team. I get the reports every day, and I read each and every sales report. And people might think that's crazy, that it's too much work, but that allows me to have my ear on the ground, so that at least for our distribution company, I know, okay, what are their pain points, so that we would be able to react to it almost instantaneously. Because sometimes if you just get monthly sales reports, you don't really know what happens in between. And it allows me to see like, oh, we're working more with residential stuff. Maybe there's something more we could do. Maybe we can boost our social media with regards to the commercial and industrial segments or verticals. So it allows me to know where we're lacking and how we're reacting. We could react to things a little bit more quickly, just by having our ear to the ground. Also reading a lot, kind of seeing where trends are going. And I guess one of the things that's also important is that, like seeing the effect of the effects, just not really looking at what's obvious, but sort of like reading between the lines as to like, okay, so now that we have COVID, okay, what's next? Okay, I mean, there are like the obvious things, like people are going to be disinfecting more and all that. But then if you look at that, you kind of see like, okay, so people are disinfecting more, then what happens next? What's the byproduct of that, or what are the behavioral patterns or behavioral changes that will occur as a result of that? Like, will people replan their offices differently? So with my architecture practice, we've also stayed ahead of the curve in that sense, that like whenever we do residential stuff, we make sure that, okay, it's kind of like COVID ready, or pandemic ready, that they have isolation rooms, so that if people, those are the things that we never ever thought of would happen when we design. Like, you have a disinfection room right at the entry foyer, all those kind of things that make us change the way we design things. With restaurants, our value proposition is, again, we have our ear to the ground. We just don't design whatever the client tells us, but we sort of go over and beyond what we're expected to do as designers. Like, for example, we do a lot of restaurant work, and we know that, just being on Instagram and Facebook, you see how people take food posts, and that goes a lot into creating the mileage or the marketing mileage that these restaurants need. People don't really pay for ads anymore, but what makes restaurants go viral or makes them popular are the people, not even influencers, just the regular Joes who would post food posts on their social media and for friends and family to see. So we made sure that when we were designing restaurants, that the logos were embossed on the tables, so that when people take their food posts from the top, the branding is already there, and that goes, without them having to tag or geotag the restaurant. The branding or the logo is already there on the table, so that goes a long way, and people will already know, okay, this is that restaurant, without them having to post what it is.
That's amazing, Lice. Later on, we can share all of your, company so people can see and see all your designs and Ecotecture and Tali, as well as Geogreen, because they have to see the things that you're doing. Talking about it doesn't do justice to the actual work that you've done, especially all of your projects. I mean, we talked extensively about Geogreen, but your architecture practice in the Philippines is also quite massive. You've done a lot of huge restaurants, resorts. What other things do you do, Lice? Like the
Right
biggest
now,
projects you have? Yeah.
well, with the pandemic, it's funny because before the pandemic, we would maybe do like one or two homes for like clients a year. But our focus was mostly hospitality, so resorts, hotels. We would do office buildings. We would do a lot of retail and restaurants. But COVID happened, and we had to pivot quickly. So of course, the restaurants were not operating, so all our restaurant projects were put on hold during the pandemic. Hotels, resorts, of course, were not building, so that got put on hold. And offices also had to kind of tighten their belts because of for budgetary reasons during the pandemic. So that all kind of was stopped to a ground halt during the pandemic, unfortunately. So we had to take on more residential jobs. So we were at that time, from just doing maybe one or two residential projects a year, it grew to like almost like 15 homes in 1 year. As you know, residential is very involved. It's almost a different animal because it's very emotional for the owners. That kind of, was the sort of reaction to everything that was happening around us. And that kind of kept us afloat during those times. Well, what I, tell like our team, our design team, is that, we're not picky. We don't say that, okay, we're just going to do hospitality. We can't. I mean, unfortunately, that's a difference between the US and the Philippines. Like, the market here is so small, so you can't really be picky. Whereas in the US, you could specialize. If I worked for a firm that was just doing hospitality for 10 years, and you can afford to do that because the market's big enough, so you could, just thrive and just keep on doing that. Unfortunately, in the Philippines, it's not the same way. So you kind of have to be more flexible, and you kind of have to be diverse with your practice. So what I've told our design team is that we take projects on big and small. We don't really pick, but I guess what is in the DNA of our design firm, of Ecotecture Design Studio, is that sustainability is at the core of each and every project. So that would be the common thread that holds all the projects together. With regards to project type, there is no specialization, but with regards to our core values as a company, it's about sustainability, because you can incorporate sustainability in a small apartment renovation. You could incorporate it in a master plan development. So that's something that we kind of hold dear and make sure that that's our focus for all the projects.
Do you also educate your clients? What if they're not into sustainable architecture? Is that how you vet your clients?
We don't really vet. Like, I think there's always an opportunity to to work with people who even are not the slightest bit interested in doing sustainability, but it's just a matter of like reassuring them that, hey, it doesn't necessarily have to cost more to build green. So once you kind of ask them, like, first, if they're even interested, like how, there are like 50 shades of green as well. Like you can go light green and super dark green. Like what do I mean by that? Light green is like, okay, you'll do the minimal just so that, okay, you're kind of like helping the environment and reducing your energy consumption. But if you want to go dark green, which means that you're going to go full solar panels and, EV car charging system and all that, you can do that too. And of course, that's just a matter of, how much are you willing to spend. But it doesn't mean that, because there are things that, you could convince them that if it will bring down their operational cost because of the energy consumption. So if it's kind of like making them have them like do a paradigm shift, thinking short term and thinking more long term as to, operational expenses, then that's kind of the mindset that you kind of have to help them get into.
Yeah, that's a good idea, especially when you have operational costs in the long run that you have to take care of. It might be more expensive upfront, but later on it will be more cost effective. So,
Yeah.
like one of the things that Liza is also really into giving back to the community. I know because we've been friends forever. Even her kids, like she's trained her kids to always give back. I think generosity is the key to success. So the more you give, the more you receive. I think Liza is extremely blessed because she's also very generous. As a friend, seeing Liza through for the last 23 years, she's always given back to the women, to the community. So I want to conclude this conversation with a question or two questions. So how do you manage everything you have going in your life? And can you give us your top three hacks? Most of the people who are listening are aspiring firm owners or entrepreneurs and business owners who are just maybe struggling with their company growth. What are your three top hacks or advice you can give to our audience?
Okay. So, what this is one thing that, I want to share that I've learned the hard way. You kind of have, I guess people go through the stage that they kind of feel they're superwoman and they can't do everything, but you can't. You realize like your limitations. And I guess what has allowed me to do what I'm doing right now and get to this point, what I'm doing right now is, learning the hard way that I cannot do everything. And learning that for me, like a case of, having to eat humble pie and having the humility to know that you can't take on getting, when your firm or your company gets to, a sufficient size, having professionals help you, having a team of, consultants help you that are better than you, and you can't, just really admitting that you don't know everything is, for me, the biggest thing that was like, it was, I think, the biggest hurdle that prevented me from growing, at some point. And when I accepted that and embraced it, that, okay, I have to hire people, who are better than me, who are smarter than me, then that allowed me to grow my companies as well. Also, so that's the first hack. It's just like outsource if you can, and or get consultants if you can, but you don't have to take on the weight of the world, because you have to also, which is hack number two, is be self-aware as to what your strengths are and your weaknesses as an entrepreneur, a person, or any kind of whatever role or hat you wear in your life. And allowing that also allowed me to knowing that allowed me to focus on what I needed help with. So I've identified my strengths and weaknesses, and now that I know my weaknesses, so I'm like, okay, I would need help because I'm not a finance person, I'm not very tech savvy and all that. So I hired like a good financial manager who is my CFO and runs the makes sure that the finances are in check. So knowing, just being self-aware as to what your strengths and weaknesses are, I think is a big deal. So that you can focus on what you love doing. And lastly, I guess the biggest hack is for me, it's worked for me, and this is something that I think allows me to do whatever I'm doing right now, is just having that sense of balance in your life. Aya, you and I know that we used to like work like crazy, and yes, like it was fun for a while, but then you get to a point in your life. And I think that is like the biggest realization I had with COVID. Unfortunately, I've lost some friends due to COVID, and you kind of rethink and you go through this existential crisis, and it's like, what am I here for? What am I living life for? I mean, do I want to like die in the office? Do I want to like work 23 hours a day and just not see my kids and all that? And you realize like time is so valuable after after COVID. You realize that, and having lost friends and family to COVID, you kind of just have to be intentional. I wake up every day, like each and every minute of my day, I make sure that whatever it is I'm doing is something that I love. It's something that I'm passionate about, because it doesn't make sense to be unhappy with whatever it is that you're doing. If life's too short.
Thanks, Liza. So what's next for Liza Morales? I'm sure
I
something's
don't know.
cooking.
I don't know. I don't really know. It's just like, as I mentioned earlier, it just happens. Things just happen organically. There are opportunities. I don't say, people come with me with opportunities every day. And, it's so tempting to just say yes to everything, but you kind of have to just really always go to your core and your values as to, is this in line with my end goal? And that kind of just is my, I guess, compass, and that guides me in whatever I'm doing. It's easy to get distracted with so many opportunities that abound, but just really sticking to what you do best and what you love doing is, I guess, what helps me navigate that.
To summarize our conversation, I see like a common thread is really your passion and purpose for you to succeed, right? And I asked you yesterday, if you were to sum up your life in a sentence or in a quote, what would it be? And Liza said this: do it with passion or don't do it at all. I mean, your journey is amazing. We all went through the same journey as an architect, working 15, 16, 20-hour days, going through some personal stuff, but you never fail to still give back. Liza has been one of my mentors and also really an inspiration to me. And I always look up to her for business advice, family advice. So thank you so much, Liza, for agreeing to be a guest in my podcast. And I look forward to seeing you in Manila soon.
Cool. Thanks so much, Aya. This was fun.
That was Liza Morales of Ecotecture and Philippine Geogreen. Thank you for listening to this podcast. And if you're still around, we hope you enjoyed this episode. Please take a moment to review us on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever you listen to your podcast. We're open to know what you'd like to see covered in future episodes, so don't hesitate to reach out to us on Facebook, Instagram, and LinkedIn, or be part of the Architect My Life community.